what are the top actions that you need to take into your project to make sure your project will be successful or to make sure that your project can succeed. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management specialist. I help professionals to become successful project managers. Before I start, make sure you like this content here and follow me for more content, because also that helps me to understand the value from what I'm doing, but also make sure that this content can reach more people and more people can learn and understand project management. So there's a question that I get quite often and can be I classify this as a kind of general question because it's, what should I do in my project? What is the top priority that I need to take into my project? What type of document that I need to take into my project? And before, of course, giving you a full answer on that, I would like to take a step back and explain some very important points here into project management that they are required for you to understand and, of course, to succeed in managing a project. First of all, I want to explain, I'm not going to talk about the PMBOK 7 edition about the principles, but I would like to give you a definition what's a principle. Of course, I understand that people know that, but I also want to come back to this definition to make clear and we can build from here. So what's a principle itself? It's basically a fundamental truth or proposition or a generic theory that you can use as a foundation for your system, for your belief, for your behavior, or to guide your actions. And why this? So what's a principle? Well, you can have all types of principles in different areas in your life. For example, you can have, if you look for the old days, because one of principles that you can have is, for example, saying the truth. By principle, I always say the truth. That's a good principle to have. That means that in the situation, this principle will guide you. Even though if you're struggling with something, you say, oh, but my principle is to always say the truth. Then you're going to say the truth and also take the consequences of that. And that's a bit the principles that you can have. You can have, of course, different kind of principles like by principle, or if you look for, again, what I mentioned by the old days, the principles in the Bible, that you shall not kill, you should not steal, and this kind of stuff. There's all types of principles that are there. But now, how this is related with project management? So the last edition from the PMBOK, from the 6th to the 7th edition, PMBOK, it's changed from a process-oriented guide with best practice for a principle-oriented guide. What does it mean then to be principle-oriented? It means there's those sets of principles that you can see here: stewardship, team, stakeholder, value, system thinking, leadership, tailoring, quality, complexity, risk, adaptability, resilience, and change. Those are principles that you're going to see in all types of projects, in all environments. And why this is so important? Well, because project management has been evolving together with the board, and now we have different approaches, different frameworks, and the complexity from what we do, it keeps increasing. So one of the principles in the PMBOK is that I'm highlighting here, that two very important principles that you have, it's what's called system thinking and complexity. Well, basically, what's system thinking? Here I'm using, again, PMBOK definition, because that's, I think, to show you how it's that relevant to project management. System thinking is basically that you're going to recognize, evaluate, and respond to dynamic circumstances within and surrounding your project. And then you're going to see all those moving pieces that you have there. And you're going to, with a holistic view, to see how you can positively affect them to make sure that your project outcome is positive, to make sure that your project performance is positive. So that's what system thinking. And what's complexity? Well, complexity is the complexity principle in the PMBOK. It's basically that you're going to continue evaluate and navigate the project complexity, that approach project complexity for the different approach plans, project teams, to make sure that your team can successfully navigate this complexity to deliver your project with success. So complexity basically can emerge. Complexity is a result from human behavior, system interaction, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Putting those things in a very easy words. If you're managing a project there, you have a lot of different systems that will influence. So what's a different system? For example, if you are managing a project, you having another project in your organization that's also competing for the resource. You have in the operation teams with the organization that they have different. They are also competing for research, but they also have different focus in the business what you're doing there. You have suppliers that can interact with your project in different ways. You have your customer interacting with your project in different ways. You have your team creating these different environments, and because of behaviors, because their own lives can bring complexity to their project, and so on. So there are all those type of pieces. They're interconnected somehow. For example, if one of your team members he gets sick, that's of course that's a risk, but that's a complexity that will affect your project in some way. If a supplier gets bankrupt, those are a lot of different things that are outside of your control, and they are going to affect your project. Then you have your organization, you have other stakeholders, resources, and all types of different things. That's why when you see the PMBOK, you see these talking about human behavior, system interaction, because there's all types of systems, there's all types of uncertainty and ambiguity that will create complexity for you to manage in your project. And of course, how to approach these complexities, make sure that you have this system thinking, this is a holistic view, where you see those connections, and then you're evaluating, recognizing, and responding with all those types of complexities into your team to make sure that your project can succeed. But then going back to my initial question, what does it have to do with the top actions that you need to take right now? Well, because if you consider that you are in a complex environment, that's basically impossible for me or anyone that does not have a full understanding about your environment, the complexity that you're dealing with, tell you what's the most important thing that you need to do it now. Because the actions that you're going to take, the prioritization that you're going to take, it will depend on what are the circumstances, what I also like to call the boundary conditions, maybe that's a very engineering term. What are the circumstances within your project and around your project that affect what you need to do? Based on that, you can take the decision what's the priority, what you need to call. And this is a very nice thing. Well, first of all, because that gives you a very good opportunity for you as a project manager to add value to your team. But also that brings at least some type of safety, let's call like that, for the project managers there, because it's very difficult to artificial intelligence in the way we have right now, even with ChatGPT, with all the things that it can do. It's still very difficult for an artificial intelligence to handle all this complexity. Because, yeah, even though ChatGPT can perform a lot of tasks, handling with human beings, understanding those interactions, it's not so straightforward. And that requires the system thinking that's also not so easy to build, considering all the variables that you can have there. So this complex and system thinking and complex environment that we need to deal with project also helps you to have safety if you can think about artificial intelligence. But also it's a very nice thing, because once you understand those principles, once you understand how it needs to work with the system thinking, you can understand how to deal with projects. And this is very key, because I have seen even senior managers asking those senior project managers asking those questions. What should I do in my project? Well, for me, it's impossible to tell you what you should do in your project without understanding what your project is about, what's the environment where you're executing this project, what are the relations that you have with your team, with your customer, with your suppliers. Because those are the type of things that we're going to define what needs to be done, define what are the priorities, will progress you in the decision making. For example, I'm going to try to put this in a different perspective. Let's make an analogy here. If someone, let's say that you want to improve your life, And then I come here without knowing anything about you, and I come here and tell you what you must do right now in your life is focusing in exercising. For some people, that might be true. But then your answer might be, okay, but I already exercise 4 or 5 times per week. So I already have this high focus in my life. So your advice is useless. Or let's say that I say your focus right now should be saving money. But then you come and tell me, well, but I already have a very nice saving. I have a nice job, and I have been saving for 10 years, so I have a very decent saving. So your advice for me at this point, it's useless in my life. I'm going to give you an example for me. If people like right now, one of my focus and one of the very important priorities in my life is making sure I have time to spend with my wife and with my children. I have two kids, 4 years old and 2 years old. So I want to spend time with them, to invest time, to have a good relationship with them, and to create nice memories. But if someone would give me this advice that I need to spend time with my wife and with my kids 10 years ago, that basically would be useless. Because 10 years ago, I was single and I did not have kids. And if someone tells me, oh, you need to spend more times with your kids, say, I don't have kids, then what you're talking about, this is useless. And that might sound a very stupid example, but it works in the same way with a project. I cannot come and tell you, hey, what you need to focus in your project here is to make sure that your corrosion test is starting on time, because the corrosion test has a long lead time, and first, that might not even be true for depending on the type of test and the type of product that you work, but it can be even a different case. Say, yeah, but on my project it's about developing a service. I do not have even a corrosion test. My project is to build a house. I don't have a corrosion test. So it does not make sense. It does not make sense. I'm telling you that, yeah, one of the components that you need to be worried about is to make sure that you can kick off your plastic component on time, because usually the tooling for the plastic components, if it's a complex, again, product or complex component itself, the tool can have a very long lead time from, I don't know, 20 to up to 30 weeks, depending on the type of supplier and complexity, what you need to do there. Then you come back to me and say again, yeah, but I'm managing a project, a construction project. I do not have any plastic component to buy there. Or you come and say, yeah, but I'm developing a software. I'm not even buying anything there. So it's basically irrelevant any type of advice that I can give to you without understanding what your project is there. What are your organization? What are the interface? What are the systems moving around your project? And by systems moving around your project, I mean your suppliers, your customers, the organization itself, because you have inside of organization, you have a lot of different systems. You can have, for example, operations area, and you can have HR, and you can have procurement area, and then you have the project execution itself. That I guess that's where you are. So all those kinds of smaller systems inside of organization, they interact with each other, and they are going to create complexity to your project, and they are going to require system thinking for you to solve those things. So a general advice, it's useless. It's the same thing when you ask me, when I get the question about what's a document that every project should have. Well, this is any type of answer that I can give to you, that I say your project must have this document. It's useless, because it will depend on your organization, your projects, your industry, even your country, and a lot of things are around there. And just to give you an idea, again, what's a project? All those things here that you see, they are projects. The Coliseum in Rome, a car, an iPhone, a new factory, a house, a new manufacturing line, a new product, a movie, a big event, the World Cup or the Olympic Games, software, ChatGPT, an Android, SAP, all those things are a project. So it's very useless. I can give you an advice that would be, I can give you an advice, for example, that would be good if you are developing a new car or a new system inside of a car, a new, but this advice that would be very useful here to develop a car would be useless if your project is to organize the next World Cup there. There are different set of requirements. There are different set of constraints, different stakeholders involved there. It's impossible to come with a already pre-format answer for this type of question. And again, this is why project management is so nice, because if you develop, and that's also why this last change here in the PMBOK was very nice to talk about the principles. Because if you understand the principles that you need to execute a project, then you can work anywhere. Because although the type of complexity that you're going to see in different levels in a project will be different if you're working in all those types of different products or different projects, but complexity is always going to be there. It might not be that you are developing, it might not be there that you have some constraints because of technical complexity of a product, or some timeline constraints or constraints into the organization or procedures into the organization. But complexity, it will be there. It might be something that you need to handle with the customer, like if you're developing something that's completely new, fully understanding the customer requirements there. It's a very type, if you're developing a software, that's a big type of complexity that you have in a project, which usually this level of complexity, it will be much less there, for example, than if you're building a house. Why? Because everyone can see a house and everyone understands what's a house. Then it makes much easier to gain clarity in what the customer needs than if they tell you, I want to have a website that looks cool, that everyone likes to access. Yeah, but all those things, they are not so easy to measure. So understanding those principles, that's key for you to succeed. And soon you stop to look for ready answers and you start to understand that you are embedded in a complex environment that will require a holistic view for a lot of things. And you start to see all those connections that you can have there in a very complex way. Sooner that you can start to stop thinking about in this black and white view and what needs to be done, and you get a full understanding about the system, which makes it easier for you to deliver value for your project. So you are going to have those values. You understand that your primary goal of any project is to deliver value. So then the complexity already start there, because what's value? What's value for a project? In some case, the value of a project, it can be the social impact that will cause. In other case, it's money. In other case, it's customer satisfaction. In other case, can be reducing costs. In other case, can be improving the operations from the company. In other cases, projects, they are there because the company needs to adapt to legal requirements. So what's value in a specific what is value by itself it will already change. So if you just need to understand what's value, then your first goal as a project manager starts to make it clear, okay, what's value in this specific situation here? Because then what you are doing there is understanding what's your goal, what's the vision for your project, what's the value that will bring for the organization, why the organization is executing that. Then with that perspective, then you start to move to the other principles and say, then you're going to have the complexity for the environment that will always go around you, and that's always going to change. As I mentioned, there's probably millions of options how things can change, and that will affect your project in one way to another. For example, one of your key team members can decide to leave the company, or he can be sick, or maybe someone in his family might get sick or might pass away in a critical time and he'll take time off. Or it can be a supplier that would this can be a supplier that would be bankrupt, can be a supplier that will have the factory destroyed by any kind of environment for rains, snow, hurricanes, or whatever stuff that can happen around the world. Uh, it can be that maybe a type of component that you're using, it's going to be end of life. There's all types of things in the organization. They might change their goals. The organization might be face problems with cash flow. The world will change. Like a few years ago we had COVID. When someone would imagine that the entire world would stop, close the doors, and everyone would stay at home. That's something that I guess that would be manageable for everyone there. Okay, if you look for history, that happened a few times in history, or I do not know how many times already happened in history. But this is there, you like it or not. So trying to say, but I do not like that, and I want to have clear directions and someone telling me what to do. Sorry to say that, but if that's your case, you should not be a project manager, because you're always going to be suffering, because those things will keep changing and you always want someone to tell you what to do. No, you need to learn to think by yourself. You need to learn how to develop this holistic view. And that's when you are going to, once you learn that, you learn what project management is about. Then it starts to be much more fun. Honestly, I think this is the fun of the game, because no one can tell you exactly what's going on there and what's going to be. Things change, and even the complexity is always there. Even if you're in your operation or in your operating environment, if you're operating a manufacturing line, the complexity is always there. When you talk about operation, you're going to talk about uh, variety of products that you need to produce, quantities, forecasts, delivery issues, and so on. There's a different type of complexity, of course. It might be more stable in some aspects than you have in a project, because with a project, if it's everybody that you're doing is new, and it will be like that. So you need to understand that also and learn with that, but also enjoy that. Because if in the end you hate this kind of environment, you should not work with project management. You should not work as a project manager. And I'm saying that with all the respect, because if you do not like it, you can do something else. There are plenty of other stuff that you can look for. Because it will be very difficult to be very good in something that you hated and that you suffer because of that. And of course, when I'm talking about you need to like it, I'm not talking about that everything will be just like roses and flowers around, the sunshine, rainy. No, you're going to have tough times. You're going to have good times. That's the same thing. There are sunny days. There are weather. There are bad. There are rainy days and so on. But this is life that goes. These variations are a normal thing from life. So do not expect someone to tell you right away. And even if you're working into your own organization, if you tell a manager or a director what to do and they tell you straightforward what to do without knowing more what's going on to your project, very likely they are taking the wrong decision, because no one will know as well as a project as you, project manager. And of course, if you're asking for prioritization from a manager, what you need to do to ask for prioritization, because it's very, very fair that you think that some decisions are not up to you, and that's the reality. But you also need to explain the options. Okay, if you decide not to prioritize this activity right now, this is going to be the impact in the project. Say, if you deprioritize activity in the critical path of your project, what's the consequence? You are going to delay the project. You need to make this clear for the decision maker there. And that's also part of your job. So you're not going to find anyone that can tell you what to do. You always need to keep questioning yourself. What's the most valuable thing I can do in this situation? Then, of course, that's why studying and understanding your project in deep is important. Because if you do not understand what's going on with your timeline, if you do not understand what's going on with your business case, if you do not understand what's going on with your team, what's going on with your customer, what's going on with your stakeholders, what's going on with your scope, then your life is going to be a nightmare. Because then you already do not know your project, and you are being bombarded for a lot of those things that are happening around you that you don't have any type of control. And people are asking you, what should we do? People are asking you to lead something. People are asking you for direction. Sometimes even you get questions from directors say, okay, what are options that we have? But if you do not understand what's going around of your project, it's basically impossible that you're going to do something like that. It's impossible to tell to ask for a prioritization if you do not understand the impact of the actions that you're taking there. And if you do not invest the proper time to know your project, to know what's going on with your team, to know the ins and outs of your timeline, to know the ins and outs of your business case, then you're going to get stuck. And even then, even though if you understand, even though if you try to follow those project management principles, then you're going to have a hard time. But that's not because of the principles that they do not work. It's because the steps that you are taking to work into your project, they are not right. That's also why when I do events, and that's why when I do my own trainings, I try to talk about principles, and I try to challenge people in the ways of thinking with different kind of questions, because that's something that you need to develop into yourself. And that's why I also mention in the trainings and try to mention everything I do that your habits, that's your agenda and where you're spending your time, that's what's why I'm going to say that if you're going to be a successful project manager or not. Because I've seen project managers that they're just running around the complexity without having this holistic view here of a project. Then that means that you are just jumping on the first action that pop up for you to do. Like, oh, this supplier, there's a problem here. Okay, let's solve it. Very good, but is that the priority that you need to focus your time right now? Because if it's a task that's a very low priority, then that means that you're investing time in something that will bring very small result into your project, and probably the important things, the critical path, or if you also look for the Pareto rule, for the things that could bring me the 20% of the things that could bring you 80% of results, no one is taking care of that. And then you're struggling into your project. And this is so important. That's why I'm investing this time here, and I'm talking about system thinking and complexity. Because if you do not understand those two things, those two principles here, and if you do not understand that everything that you need to do will be affected by the complexity in your project, around your project, you keep stuck in those type of questions. But what documents should I do? I don't know. What type of project you have? What is required to your organization? What documents can add value to your project? What actions should I take right now? What's the priority? What's your critical path? How does it affect your team? What your team needs to execute now? Because if you do not even understand that, how can you lead your team? How you're going to lead your team if you cannot even figure what are the important actions that needs to be done there? And by no means I'm saying you that you need to figure everything by yourself. That's why you have a team. But what you need is you need to understand how you're going to lead this team, how you're going to discuss, ask questions to your team members. What is important? What's going on? Do you have roadblocks? How can I help you? What's the most important thing that you need to do next to make sure that we can achieve our goal? What are the roadblocks that you have there? Do you see any other, do you have questions for any other areas? You need to foster this kind of things as a project manager. Why? When you are having those discussions, you are trying to identify complexity. And once you identify this complexity, then with the system thinking, you can start to solve it. Then you can get direction to your project and you can solve something into your project. And so you can go for a deeper level, or instead of a deeper level, I can say you can raise your project management maturity. So you move from the level that you are very inexperienced or a junior that do not have fully understanding or do not have this system thinking and do not have a fully understanding on the complexity, and you start to grow your leadership skills into that direction, considering that, okay, how I can build a holistic way, a holistic view for my project, what are the complexity around of it, and how we can deliver, make sure that we can deliver the value that our organization is looking for there. So to wrap up, to come up to the question, what are the top actions that you need to take right now into your project? Short answer, yes, it's impossible for me to say. What's important for you to understand is understand what's value for your project, understand what's the complexity of your around and within your project, understand, build this holistic view into your project and this holistic view and what needs to be done to deliver this value. And based on that, you can start to define what action that you need to take, what are the priorities for your team to move forward with that. Because without that, you're going to keep struggling, things will keep changing, and you are not going to have the result that you want. Again, make sure you like this video here, because that helps this to get to more people to learn project management, but helps me also to understand the value that what I'm doing here, the value that I can bring to you. If you have, also make sure you follow me for more content. Every week I'm releasing more content on YouTube, on Instagram, and make sure also, if you have questions, feel free to ask. On Instagram, I have a Q&A box open every day. You can ask all type of questions. And you can ask these open type of questions, of course, without background, and I'm going to answer you the best as I can, considering what I just mentioned here to you. But depending on how you approach this, you can also have a chat. You can give me some background and ask a specific question. That makes it much easier to give you some type of guidance there. I hope you like the content. Again, don't forget to like it and share with more people, because also that helps me to grow and to make sure that I'm going to the right directions. If you have comments, feel free to ask, and see you soon. Bye.